Confucius, the man, the humanist at the turn of a new millennium, by Alfred. 2,550 years ago today, Confucius was born in the ancient state of Lu. The place now lay close to the modern-day Khufu County of Shandong Province at northeastern China. It was the 21st year reign of the Duke Xiang. Western sinologists call him Confuzi, Confucius, or Confucius. To the Chinese, however, he is fondly referred to as Kongzi, Kong the Master. He is to China the sage, the teacher, and a hero of a civilization. His historical preeminence has no equal in any other civilization. Kongzi's contemporary was Gautama Buddha of India and Pythagoras of Greece. Socrates, the rightful father of Greek philosophy, was born some years after the death of Confucius. Like most great thinkers, Kongzi was a victim of his own historicity. China was then divided into small conflicting feudal states, each one aiming at conquering each other. Violence, disorder, and destruction prevailed among the ruling class, and there appeared no invisible power above, nor visible power below, capable of solving the state of affairs. A contemporary philosopher, Feng Yulan, described the situation saying, "Such were the conditions faced by the rulers of the feudal states of the time, and it was the common endeavor of all the schools of thought since Confucius to solve these problems. The whole civilization was in total threat of disintegration. It was about the 6th and 5th century BC, that is 1,800 years after the birth of the Chinese civilization. Historically, it is referred to as the Chun Chu, or the spring and autumn period, a period which lasted about 242 years from 722 BC to 481 BC. At that time, the authority of the royal house of Zhou had disintegrated, and the Middle Kingdom, as how the Chinese would fondly call its country, had been divided into 12 smaller kingdoms which fought for hegemony. It was against this historical backdrop that our sage, Confucius, was born. An eminent English sinologist, Lionel Giles, describes Kongzi as the most consummate of sages, the loftiest moralist, and the most subtle and penetrating intellect that China has ever seen. He went further by saying that Confucius is the greatest and noblest representative of the greatest, happiest, and the most civilized people on earth. Kongzi's greatness as a philosopher and teacher was remarkable. He may not have been a Socrates who produced Plato, who in turn produced Aristotle, but to all China, Kongzi is the sage, the teacher, the master for the past 2,550 years. But why did the brightest men of his day sit at his feet? Lun Yu, or the Analects, a book attributed to him, explains that Confucius was bold, poised, stimulating, human, and wholesome. More than that, he was a man of great learning. Undoubtedly, he was a great transmitter and hermeneutic of the wisdom of ancient China. Confucius did humbly said, "I am a transmitter and not a creator. I believe in and have a passion for the ancient." He more than just transmitted the wisdom of the age before him. His passion and dedication for teaching has set the standard high. As a serious transmitter of ideas, he became the most credible interpreter, and as a venerable hermeneutic, he has become a great philosopher himself. With focused mind and a determined will, Confucius set about to bring order and peace to his age. With pathetic persistence, he sought through the different conflicting states, looking for a ruler who would be willing to employ him and his ideas in their government. But wisdom and passion did not find him an employer. Tired and frustrated, Confucius abandoned his political ambitions and retired. Kongzi's destiny was not to be an advisor of conflicting small states. His rendezvous with destiny far exceeded what he was striving for. He was meant by Chen to be a teacher of all under heaven. Confucius turned his attention to teaching the young men of his time who would later carry on his legacy. It is said that he had some 3,000 students, of whom 72 were his closest disciples, known for their outstanding virtue and character. He also devoted much of his old age in editing ancient classics and making commentaries to some classical texts. He died at the age of 72 amidst his beloved 72 disciples. He was unaware that he was to become one day the teacher of all under heaven. But what was his mission? What was his vision? He offered a prognosis that is at once inspiring and eternal. It had to be a world under an atmosphere of virtue, peace, and humanism. He taught humanity to embrace the ideals of Ren, humanity or benevolence, Yi, rectitude, Li, civility or propriety, Ji, wisdom, Shin, commitment to one's language. Otherwise, there was to be no hope that the world could ever be spared the evil tyranny, cruelty, and violence that was destroying it. He was always aware that the exaltation of virtue and the virtuous is often despised and prosecuted, but he cautioned his disciples to be prepared to face frequent poverty or even distress in the process. He warned them too that the pursuit of material wealth over the virtue was the concern of the small and unenlightened mind. The virtuous gentleman, unmindful of comfort and safety, must fix his attention upon higher things. His repeated warning to his disciples was remarkable. Confucius said, "Gentleman reaches upward, the inferior man reaches downward. The gentleman is always calm and at ease, the inferior man is always worried and full of distress. The gentleman understands what is right, the inferior man understands what is profitable. The gentleman cherishes virtue, the inferior man cherishes possession. The gentleman thinks of sanctions, the inferior man thinks of personal favors. And the gentleman demands on himself, the inferior man makes demands on others. As for the master himself, his complete devotion to learning is unrivaled." Confucius said, "At 15 I set my heart on learning. At 30 I was firmly established. At 40 I had no more doubts. At 50 I knew the will of heaven. At 60 I was ready to listen to it. At 70 I could follow my heart's desire and without transgressing what was right." Confucius was himself a man of deep piety and reverence. Still, his age was determined by primitive fear of the unknown, marred by gross and cruel superstition. The kings, dukes, and princes of those times firmly believed in the prophetic nature of dreams, the efficacy of the art of divination, and even the baleful power of the spirits of the dead. People cowered in fear during eclipse, and human sacrifices were carried out on the death of a ruler who was just less than a century past his time. In such a setting, Confucius chose to redirect the minds of the people away from the supernatural and toward the living problems of human society and the ordering of the state. Against this historical backdrop, one could easily imagine the novelty and ingenuity of a man heralding a new age of humanism. Confucius said, "Without humanity, a man cannot long endure adversity, nor can he long enjoy prosperity. The humane rest in humanity. The wise finds it beneficial." He reminded us that the task of life is of man and for man. Only the humane can love men and can hate men. And yet people refuses to undertake the task that properly belongs to him. He lamented, saying, "Is there anyone who exerts himself even for a single day to achieve humanity? I have not seen any who had not the strength to achieve it." He determined that the resolute scholar in the human person will, under no circumstance, seek life at the expense of humanity. On occasion, they will sacrifice their lives to preserve their humanity. Confucius tells us, "Riches and honor are what every man desires, but if they can be obtained only by transgressing the right way, they must not be held. Poverty and loneliness are what every man detests, but if they can be avoided only by transgressing the right way, they must not be evaded. If a gentleman departs from humanity, how can he bear the name? Not even for the lapse of a single meal does a gentleman ignore humanity. In moments of haste he cleaves to it, in seasons of peril he cleaves to it." Such a commitment to humanity and rectitude has forever enshrined his doctrine in the hearts of the people. Kongji draws inspiration from history. In particular, he looked back to Wen Wang, the founder of the Zhao dynasty, who, in the depth of his wisdom and virtue, had set up the institutions and organized the complex feudal hierarchy of the new dynasty, who crafted solemn rites and music for his people. To Confucius, Li defines the required civility in the human government, and to abuse the forms of Li was the abuse of reality and the moral order which they represented. As Confucius said, courtesy without Li becomes tiresome, courteousness without Li becomes timidity, daring without Li becomes insubordination, while frankness without Li becomes effrontery. He further admonished the rulers of his age, saying, "If a ruler can administer his state with Li and courtesy, then what difficulty will he have? If he cannot administer his state with decorum and courtesy, what has he to do with rights?" It was in the abuse of right and title that Confucius deplored. He vigilantly called for Zheng Ming, or the rectification of names. He summoned man to live up to the social appellation attached to his name, and insisted upon a careful and reverent attention to the spirit and letter of the rights that he emphasized in the proper governance of the state. When Kongji was asked about government, he answered, "To govern is to set things right. If you begin by setting yourself right, who will deviate from the right?" And when the Duke of Qi asked Confucius about government, Confucius replied, "Let the prince be prince, the minister be minister, the father father, and son son." It is clear that Confucius wants each one to live up to the duty attached to one's name. A father who refuses to be benevolent to his son does not live up to the name of a father. A less father is no father. A ruler who refuses to serve his people does not live up to the name of a ruler and is less a ruler. A less ruler is no ruler. A son who refuses to be filial to his parents does not live up to the name of a son. Let each man therefore live according to the name he carries, and the society will be in order. When Confucius was asked to choose between the government of law from the government of virtue, he was unequivocal. Lead the people by laws and regulate them by penalties, and the people will try to keep out of jail, but will have no sense of shame. Lead the people by virtue and restrain them by the rules of Li, and the people will have a good sense of shame and moreover will become good. In one interesting argument, Ji Kang asked Confucius, "Suppose I were to kill the lawless for the good of the law-abiding, how would that do?" Confucius retorted, "Sir, why should it be necessary to employ capital punishment in your government? Just so you genuinely desire the good, the people will be good. The virtue of the gentleman may be compared to the wind, and that of the commoner to the weeds. The weeds under the force of the wind cannot be bent." This Confucian emphasis upon Li rites and rituals must strike our contemporary man as excessively conservative, even formalistic. Yet we find in this view an idealism of the past that sets a high standard of order for the present and provided more of an impetus to reform or to infuse moral elan than to maintain a status quo. Confucius, the man, was a paragon of a moral reformer of his age. His life is sufficient evidence of this reformist spirit. He sought to conserve what was good but was not hesitant to throw away what was bad. Most clear to him was a clear sense of moral values expressed in warm humanity, optimism, humility, and good sense. The common people were to be led, cared for, educated, cherished, and protected by the rulers. Somewhere along this exposition, one may sense that these teachings aim at the Junzi, the noble gentleman of his age, which may in a sense be true. Yet Confucius insisted that it was not mere birth or social status that defines a gentleman, but even more precisely because of man's power of vision. This indeed is keener and more profound moral sense, which distinguished the gentleman and the true ruler. Which brings us to the vision of Plato's Republic, expounded some years after Confucius's death in faraway Greece. Plato would have philosopher to be king. It is in the philosopher where Plato sees profound passion for learning that leads to true wisdom. Plato exclaimed that unless philosopher becomes king or king becomes philosopher, there